All right, so yesterday I entered this short position on Bitcoin, more of a swing short, and I journaled my entry in well, this little private Discord server that I have. This is, for my personal journaling. This is I'm the only one in this server. I've gotten some questions about this, but this is just how I keep track of some of my ideas. But I want to go over this trade because I think this is a good example of my personal preferred way of using Market Cipher and Market Cipher Basic Strat. This is a good example of a multi-time frame Market Cipher Basic Strat entry. I want to go over kind of how I played this position, like where I entered, what my general plan was, where my invalidation was, and where am I looking to take profit and de-risk this trade, and what are my ultimate goals for this trade. And I'll also go over this lower time frame scalp short that I took, which is actually doing a lot better than my swing position is, just in terms of risk reward, and the fact that I already locked in this trade. I already have profits locked in, whereas with the swing short, I am still at risk. I have not taken profits or moved my stop loss, at least not towards de-risking. I actually did move my stop loss slightly up, but I'll talk about that later. And I'll quickly go over this first. I'm not going to go over my entry, but I just kind of want to talk about the general idea of looking for lower time frame entries to capitalize on higher time frame ideas, because this is something that I like to do. I like to do it for many reasons. There are, many potential positives, but there are also some potential negatives depending on your trading style and your confidence in your ability to find lower time frame trades. Because while some of the positives of doing this are, well, you can get better risk reward trades. You can potentially lock in your trades, take profit, and move your stop loss to entry or towards de-risking your trade a lot sooner. And I trade, lower time frame setups in a way where I de-risk very quickly. I, take profits at reasonable levels locally, and then I move my stop loss to entry. So no matter what, once my first target is hit, I am guaranteed to at least have a profitable trade. And if my trade gets stopped out, then I can look for another entry that could potentially play into the higher time frame idea. But there could also be some downsides to it. For example, if you saw some things that made you think Bitcoin was going to dump, you were in general biased towards shorts, and you have a choice of taking what you could say is a safer approach, which is you get a worse risk reward. Um, it's maybe safer just in terms of where your invalidation is, because if you're like me and you set a very loose invalidation on this, then price can do whatever it wants to do in general in this range. But if ultimately your idea ends up being right, and we end up, for example, breaking to the downside out of this range, then you can say this is a quote unquote safer stop loss. And maybe you can say by taking this approach, you have a higher probability of actually being able to capitalize on this idea. Maybe you won't capitalize as much, but you also are avoiding the potential to get sliced up while looking for lower time frame entries. And the kind of trader I am trying to be, I prefer to take this approach. And I've spent a lot of time working on my strategies and gaining confidence in my strategies, so that for the most part, I can typically take lower time frame ideas if they're presented. Like, I can't just take a trade anywhere, but if a trade setup is presented, I have gotten very good at waiting for those proper setups, and avoiding silly mistakes that caused me in the past to get sliced up while trading the lower time frames. So, I have spent a lot of time working on my ability to trade in order to take trades like this. And so for me, it is the approach I prefer, but I still do take trades like this as well. Because, as you can see, I entered this trade, very recently, like I think less than an hour ago. Whereas this swing short I actually entered over here. So this is where I kind of, got the idea that price may, at first rotate to the downside, maybe to the low of this range, and then potentially break that to the downside and maybe visit this key support zone that I marked out in my last video. And potentially from there, we could go lower. If we lose this support zone, I think we may potentially get a larger retrace. So, I was relatively confident in the idea, enough to take a 1% risk on a swing short, and so I opened that up. And, it just so happened that like a day later, I was presented with a very nice low time frame scalp short. And that could potentially play into the higher time frame idea, or maybe I could get stopped out of this before the higher time frame idea actually plays out, or maybe the idea just gets invalidated and we rotate to the high of the range and stop me out. But I have put myself in an advantageous position right now because regardless of what happens, even if this scenario takes place, I will still be profitable, for this overall idea. Basically, my profits from this trade will cover the losses of this trade if this were to happen. So, worst case scenario, unless I end up taking another trade and take a loss, then I should be profitable for the last 2 days. And best case scenario is, this idea could potentially continue to play out. And, I have a lower time frame scalp as well as my swing position. So I have a trade that I can, reasonably take profits more aggressively with. And I can allow this swing short to kind of just play out and take profits where I plan to. So now that that's out of the way, let's talk about the main focus of this video, which is how I used Market Cipher to enter this swing short position and also to get my bias to the downside. And I'll post screenshots of my positions just to prove that I took them, show where my entries are. And yeah, now let's get into what I was looking at yesterday when I originally entered this trade. So this was February 19th, 2024. I put the date here as well. And the first thing I posted was I started scaling into a swing short. I originally took a 0.75 risk. That's in terms of my trading capital. So I risked less than 1% of my total trading stack. And my plan is to de-risk the trade in my key support zone. And if that zone is lost, we have potential to retrace a lot further down. So this is my key support zone. Again, I talked about that in my video, my last video, whenever that was, a few days ago. And you can see I had my invalidation pretty loosely set above this high. And that is because I, thought there was definitely potential that we could SFP this high. I was kind of looking at this as a range. And as we know, ranges rotate. They can, SFP the high, SFP the low. So I was just in general shorting this range, and I wanted to have a looser stop. That meant that I had a worse risk reward, but I was willing to take that just because that's the kind of position this was. It was just kind of a, I'm willing to hold this until this range breaks one way or another, and I think it's more likely to break down. And my reasoning for this was multi-time frame Market Cipher basic strat. Also, given the bearish MC signs, I think it makes sense to retrace, at least locally, to my support zone, locally, as in like 4-hour locally, so I thought this support zone made sense. Price can make a higher low, which is why I'm looking to de-risk in that zone. So at the time, I was saying that, hey, we could come down, make a higher low, and continue this overall uptrend. And as we know, we have since taken out this high. We actually came up to wick this high out. So because of that, I think it's a little less likely that we, can get a, higher low in this area. It still could happen, but, the thing is, depending on the time frame you're looking at, we have touched the high, meaning we have created a new higher low. So we could no longer, look at this as a higher low. And because of that, it makes less sense to make a higher low in this area. Now, we've seen a structure break just to hit a support zone, and then it just continues to the upside anyway, so it's still possible, but I'm not, as confident in this zone anymore, I could say, but I still think it makes sense to de-risk there. And now getting into what I was seeing on Market Cipher, so this is the 4-hour time frame. And if you watched my video or any of the other videos on Market Cipher Basic Strat, then you'd have a better idea of what I'm talking about here. I'm not going to go over the whole strategy. I've made videos about it. There's a playlist on my channel called Market Cipher Strategies. But yeah, essentially what I was looking at on the 4-hour was we had this anchor wave, and I was kind of looking at this general clump of momentum waves as the anchor region. I don't really like calling these trigger waves, even though they are lower highs, because the money flow is still trending upwards. I really start to look for trigger waves once the money flow reverses and goes towards the direction that, I'm looking at momentum going. So if it's on the low end, then I want to see money flow start curving back to the upside. But yeah, we started seeing money flow curve to the downside, as I said right there. And that was when I became interested in this trigger wave. So, we did see the anchor money flow coming out and then a potential trigger wave printing there. And yeah, I entered this trade before I posted these screenshots, so I did front run this red dot. Next, on the 3 hour, we saw something very similar, anchor region. We had the money flow start to come out, and then we printed a trigger wave here, and we actually did have a red dot. It was unconfirmed because the next candle didn't print yet, but there was a red dot there. And in general, I don't focus too much on when the red dot prints. I kind of look at it as a whole. How does it look? And yeah, we were definitely starting to see the signs of potential reversal here with money flow coming out and then trigger waves printing to the upside. So that was the 3 hour, and the 2 hour also looked very similar. We also had money flow coming out a bit sooner on the 2 hour. So we actually had what I would call more topish signals on the 2 hour because we were actually seeing divergences with the money flow and with momentum as we were putting in higher highs. The money flow was putting in lower highs, momentum was putting in lower highs. So that is more of a top signal to me. We, did not see that on the 3 hour or the 4 hour because money flow was putting in higher highs. Even though we did see divergences with momentum, I don't think it's as strong if you do not have money flow agreeing. And this was another reason why I kind of wanted to set a looser stop. I thought there was potential that the high was not in yet because we did not see what I would consider to be top signals, at least on the 4 hour. We did see them on the 2 hour, but we also saw on the 2 hour that price continued to the upside despite the divergences with momentum and money flow. It continued putting in higher highs for a little bit, but now that we were seeing the bearishness kind of spread over to the 3 hour and the 4 hour, I was feeling a little bit more bearish. And I was thinking that, number one, price is consolidating here a lot longer than it had previously before it was pretty aggressive moves to the upside. Now we're ranging. So I still thought it was possible that we put in another higher high, but I thought it was more likely that it's just a quick SFP. And, again, because we were ranging, we know that ranges rotate, they can take out the high and the low. So that was why I was a little bit more comfortable shorting this general area. And that's also why I set a looser stop. And if I quickly click back over to current price action, you can see that as we took out this high, we actually did see the top signals that I was looking for on the 4 hour, at least what I consider to be more topish signals, which is the divergence with momentum and money flow. And yeah, that is as price put in a slightly higher high here. And I think I mentioned this already, but I did move my stop loss up a little bit. And, the only reason for that is because we are still technically ranging here. I think, it's possible that we get another rotation. Maybe we come up in SFP again. So I did move my stop loss slightly up. And, I said I entered with 0.75 risk. Me moving my stop loss up actually put me to a 1% risk. So I am risking a full 1% now. And I did not add to the trade. I just moved my stop loss up. That's something that I don't usually do, but in this situation, I decided to do it just because, I am still betting on the idea of this range breaking to the downside and, potentially retracing a lot further down. And I kind of allowed myself to do that by entering this trade with slightly less risk than I usually take. And as I said, regardless of what happens here, if price comes up and stops me out, I will still be profitable for the day, for the last 2 days. Just in general for this idea because I already locked in profits with this trade. So going back to my journal, I just said that the 4 hour through 2 hour have similar looking bearish potential. So yeah, that's what I was looking at on those time frames, and then I also checked the lower time frames to see what they were looking like, and I basically wanted to see them kind of backing up my idea. So the 1 hour also has overall downwards movement. Money flow fell into the red, got back into the green, but it was short-lived as it's now falling back into the red, backing up the idea that the higher time frame money flow may continue to trend down. So, we saw a similar looking setup on the 1 hour. We had an anchor wave, trigger wave, trigger wave. We saw the divergences as price was putting in higher highs like we saw on the 2 hour. And this is what I was talking about with money flow. It fell into the red, got back into the green, but it was short-lived because it immediately fell back into the red, kind of respecting this downwards direction. And I didn't enter this trade until I had already clicked through all the time frames. So this was, one of the kind of lower time frame signals that made me more interested in taking this trade. It kind of backed up the idea of the higher time frames continuing to play out with bearishness, and the fact that we saw that on the 1 hour, as the 4 hour was potentially about to print a trigger wave after money flow started coming out. That 1 hour played into my idea well, and definitely played a part into why I entered this trade. And then I posted the 30-minute and the 15-minute. They also show downwards movement with momentum and, more importantly, with money flow. So, yeah, I was looking at the, just in general downwards direction. We kind of had an anomaly wave here, but you can say from here over to here, it's general downwards movement. But again, more importantly, I was looking at the money flow trending down and putting in lower highs, and I saw the same thing on the 15-minute. So, all things considered, I had pretty much all time frames from the 4 hour to the 15 backing up the idea of, just bearishness here. So I decided to take this swing short. And again, I played it safe, had a loose stop, had a reasonable target to de-risk this trade. And I still think this has potential to play out much further down. Now, I think it's also possible that I get stopped out, which is why I planned for the worst case scenario. And regardless, I'm going to be profitable. But it is starting to seem like things are playing out in my favor. We got, a pretty bearish looking div even locally here as we took out that high. Things in general on the 4 hour are really starting to turn to the downside. I'm not really seeing much bullish signs. We are actually maybe seeing a bit of a bullish div on the 1 hour here. So that actually could maybe be the reason that price rotates back to the upside. But it is far out from being confirmed. I think it'll probably take at least another hour for a green dot to print here. And we can look through some of the lower time frames. 30-minute money flow is coming out. We are seeing a divergence, but with money flow coming out, it makes me think that, maybe it's just kind of like a short-lived move to the upside, if anything. So maybe this scalp gets stopped out. But I still think the, swing short has potential to play out. And I'm, still unsure as to exactly how I'm going to play this. I know at least I have a limit order set here, so, by taking profit there, I will be de-risking the trade. I'll lock in some profits. Not exactly lock in, because I use lock in to say, like, I put stop loss to entries, so whatever profits I have are locked in. But I can realize some profits, decrease my position size, and maybe even at that point, if we break the range to the downside, I can move my stop, at least to tightly above this high. That should greatly de-risk this position. Maybe I'll even put it to entry, depending on what happens here. I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to play this yet. It depends on what I see in price action. But yeah, that is in general how I entered this trade, and also how I got my general bias for this short trade. And of course, I was also, a little biased because we had an SFP of this high, and then got an aggressive move to the downside. So yeah, I was looking for low time frame opportunities to short. And it's actually interesting because I was looking at this zone to either take a long or a short depending on what happened. It's kind of tough to explain without actually explaining what I was looking at, but we were around the value area low at the point, I believe. If I pull this value area over, yeah, we were around the value area low. So depending on what happened there, I was either going to take a scalp long or a scalp short. And I did not see bullish confirmations. I instead saw bearish confirmations here. So I took the scalp short, and that ended up playing out very nicely. All right, well, I think that is everything I wanted to talk about in this video. I may make an update on this position depending on what happens. If I get stopped out of it, then I'll probably just mention it in whatever video I make next. But if it continues to play out, then I may make a video going over how I manage this trade and what some of my deeper targets are for it if we start losing key support. But anyways, thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed, consider leaving a like, subscribing, and leaving a comment. All of that helps to support my channel. I appreciate it. and I will see you all in the next video.